Hi everyone, and welcome to why AEs shouldn't determine whether a meeting is qualified, why SDRs shouldn't BANT your prospects, and how you can solve everybody's problems. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the head of sales development at Chorus.ai. Before I jump into the agenda today, I wanted to say two very important things. Number one, I absolutely love and adore account executives. I actually graduated from school and my first 3 jobs was an account executive position. So I was an AE twice over and then transitioned to an enterprise AE selling role. So I just wanted to say to all the sellers out there, you have a really tough job. I think you have to have a lot of high acumen and grind, and it's a really difficult job to push a deal across the line. Number 2, I'm not here to invalidate the objective qualifying criterion of BANT. I actually think that BANT is a great objective qualifying criterion in the background of your mind to have whenever you're talking to someone to understand whether they're qualified or not and whether you can push the deal across the line. However, today I wanted to unpack how your prospects take it whenever you ask them BANT questions directly. But before we get into the content, let's unpack a little bit of the agenda. First part of the agenda, I wanted to unpack what AEs are measured on and why they have an incentive to disqualify. Number 2, the subjectivity of that qualifying criterion if you leave it up to the AE. And number 3, we're going to finish off with how that can cause unstable qualification metrics when it comes to looking and measuring the data in your CRM. We're then going to transition over to the BANT criterion and how that makes your prospects feel in the process and how and why that gives you bad data. And then I'm not going to leave you there. For the third part of the agenda, we're going to unpack a process that you can deploy buyer ready ready today for your team that will solve both of these problems in the process and give you the objective qualifying criterion of whether a meeting is qualified or not. So let's jump into the content. Number 1. So the first thing that we're going to unpack is why there is a deep down incentive for the account executive to actually disqualify a meeting that's sent over to them as an SDR. Your account executives are typically measured on 3 different things, but 2 that we're going to unpack today is quota attainment and conversion percentages. Everybody knows an account executive is measured on quota attainment. So if I'm struggling to hit quota as an account executive, and again, coming from an account executive, the first thing deep down that we want to do is, you guessed it, point the finger at somebody. So we're going to look to the sales development team or our pipeline as the number 1 reason why we weren't hitting our goals. So when it comes to an SDR sending a meeting through the pipe, we actually, if we're not hitting quota, the first thing we want to say is it's because these meetings weren't qualified, so we innately want to disqualify those meetings that are coming through the pipe. But let's take a step back and think about an account executive that's hitting quota. If I'm an account executive and I'm hitting quota, if I'm a good account executive, I always want to hit more of quota. So I've seen in the past with the teams that I've worked with and just out in the industry that when an AE gets a packed calendar, they don't stop selling, they just start prioritizing more meetings over the others. So instead of saying that's enough pipeline sent over to them by the SDRs, they just hire their bar, bump it up north and north and north of the meetings, the kinds of meetings that they want to take. So a lot of times you'll see if an account executive has been in the business for a while, they don't want to spend the time with maybe this meeting that isn't super qualified and isn't a glamorous deal, but is actually a viable deal to your company. So when I'm taking the top-down perspective of VP of sales or a CRO or someone who's worried about the viability of the business, when I look at an account with that hat on, then I want my account executive to actually be talking to this person that is actually qualified, but isn't a super glamorous deal that's going to close right off the bat. But your account executive, the more and more meetings that they get, the more and more meetings they're going to turn down. So they're always going to ask for more and better pipe. And so in both case scenarios, whether I'm an AE who is hitting quota or I'm an AE who's struggling to hit quota, I deep down have the reasoning, the incentive to not be completely and entirely objective, but I have an agenda behind that curtain to disqualify. The second metric that AEs are measured on is conversion ratios. So when it comes to conversion ratios, there are 2 things that come into play. How many deals did I close when? Out of the pool of how many deals that were qualified, how many meetings that were qualified that I was given. So if I want to improve my conversion ratio and I want to impress my boss that's a VP of sales, I can do one of two things. I can either work really hard and become a great account executive and win more deals, which takes a lot of effort, and a lot of times we don't know how to win more deals. The other piece that I can do that's a lot easier and faster is I could say these meetings weren't qualified, so it bumps up my conversion ratios. So what I've seen account executives, if going unchecked, typically in the past, is they want to raise their conversion ratios, so they'll wait until right about when a meeting is about to close, and then they'll put the opportunity in Salesforce. So this is a shout out to the back for all the VPs of sales who have heard or seen what I'm describing right now. But you'll look at your reps and you'll say, why are they waiting so long to put the data in the CRM? Sometimes we'll diagnose it and say, oh, they just forgot. But in all reality, it's actually because they're incentivized to see whether a deal is panning out before they put that into the CRM, because it affects their conversion ratios. The second reason that you shouldn't have AEs determine whether a meeting is qualified or not is it's completely subjective. It's subjective from account executive to account executive. So whenever you have people, you have differences between those people of what they really think is qualified and what goes into making up a really good deal. So if you have 100 account executives or you have 10 account executives, you have 10 different views on actually what is qualified. So I put a tip over here on the side. I actually talked to about 10 VPs of sales in the last couple of weeks and asked them between their reps if they had any variance between what they were on average qualifying. One of the VPs of sales reported back and told me that he ran a campaign and that out of his account executives across the board, they were round robin their leads, he had a variance from one account executive qualifying 10% of the meetings, and one account executive was qualifying 90% of the meetings. So there was a delta of 80%. So my tip, before you even watch the rest of this video, maybe you just want to pause it and put it in another tab, is go to your CRM and run a report on what they on average are qualifying. If across the board you have a variance of more than 5 to 10%, I would say you probably have a problem on the consistency of what your AEs think is qualified, and you're having highly subjective qualifying criteria, and kind of, again, behind the curtain, there's some kind of agenda with your account executive. So I would change the process if you have a variance between more than 5 to 10% of what your AEs on average are qualifying, that's a qualified appointment. The third piece of why I don't think you should allow the AEs to determine whether a meeting is qualified is you'll just have unstable metrics. You'll have unstable metrics on, was this a good season for them, or was this a rough season for them? Is this a really lethal AE, or is this an AE who's just learning and trying to understand our product a little more and maybe struggling to close? The impetus in the beginning, I feel like, behind a CRM was to understand what to do in certain business decisions based on the metrics that I was being given from the CRM. But somewhere in there, we got lost. We got lost, and the main reason I think we got lost is because we had people enter the data. They entered the data from a very subjective stance. They entered the data, maybe it was, 2 or 3 months later, maybe it was right away. But you have highly subjective data that has unstable qualification metric across the board. So it gives you bad data whenever you're walking in the room and you want to forecast based on that data. So that's why I don't think that AEs should be determining whether a meeting is qualified. Again, in review, number one, they have an incentive and an actual push to disqualify the pipeline from an SDR if it's not a super highly glamorous deal. Number two, there's a lot of subjectivity on who's doing the qualifying, from rep to rep. And number three, it gives you unstable qualifying metrics within your CRM. So now let's transition over to the second piece and let's talk about BANT. Again, running in the back of my head whenever I'm talking to any kind of prospect, of course, I'm wondering whether they're qualified according to the metrics that I have within my company. So BANT, for those of you viewing who don't know what BANT is or haven't heard of it before, BANT is an acronym that stands for Budget, Authority, Need, and Timeline. So when I look at all of those 4 criteria, let's break them down piece by piece of why it can't give you the data that you need. So number one, let's unpack budget. Asking a prospect whether they have budget reminds me a lot of if you ask a little kid if they're hungry after dinner. You say, "Are you hungry after dinner?" They say no. And then you say, "I have ice cream." And they say, "I'll make room." So when you ask a prospect if they have any budget, before they see any value, and if they don't really highly value your platform, then they'll say like, "Actually, I don't have that much budget." But if they really want your platform, you'll find them scrounging around into other different buckets, finding room to buy your platform. So it's an unreliable criterion when you ask a prospect that question, because your job as a BDR isn't to find out if your prospect has budget. Your job as an account executive isn't even to find out if they have budget. Your job in both case scenarios is to drive so much urgency by uncovering pain points within your prospects day to day, and then driving home the urgency of that pain that they make room in their budget to buy your platform. So asking a prospect head on what their budget is, number one, it's super intrusive right off the bat. It's like going up to someone and asking them, "How much money do you make before and after taxes?" It's just an inappropriate way to go about business, especially in the nascent stages of the conversation when you're trying to build rapport. The second piece, authority. I go into this in my 7 deadly sins of what not to say to your prospects, but I'm just imagining from the prospect's point of view, and put that cap on for a second. You go to a website, you click request a demo, and then you're suddenly met with a SDR or someone on the business development end who says, "Hi, it's so nice to meet you. First thing first, I want to ask you a couple of questions. Number one, do you have money to buy my product? Number two, are you the decision maker?" So time out. In the case where I am the decision maker, the first thing that I'm thinking is, I just met you, and so what? Even if I am the decision maker, is that the only reason that you're talking to me? And if I'm not the decision maker, then I right off the bat feel invalidated. I feel invalidated that you're asking me a question that I don't have the authority to finally pull the trigger. So whether this is an objective criterion or not, again, this was the most solid out of the 4 that you would want to know about your prospect, I would argue. But still, it's not very appropriate. And again, in the beginning stages of your conversation, your job is to deliver so much value and to uncover pain for your prospect and how you can be of help using your platform. The third piece is the need piece. Again, the reason that I wouldn't ask that is it's very, very subjective, and I can't even imagine how that would go. Like how I see it in the industry done often is this: can you tell me the agenda or the reasons that you want my product? Most people just want to hear about your product if they came in on the inbound line. And if you hunted them on outbound, they especially just want to hear about your product. They don't want the third degree right off the bat. And then we'll finish with the timeline that's also subjective. So the 2 things that come from head on asking your prospect if they, right off the bat, if they have budget, if they're the decision maker, if they have any kind of need, and what their time frame is. Again, it gives you bad data. They're probably not going to answer you with the correct answers. And number 2, it just makes them feel bad in the beginning stages of your relationship. So now we have all these problems. Number 1, we have the problem of AE shouldn't be determining whether something's qualified or not because they have the incentive to DQ it. It gives us subjective data and it gives us unstable data in the CRM. But who should be qualifying it? Should the SDR be qualifying it? Probably not, since they're comped and measured based on whether a meeting is passed through and qualified. Number 2, we have the problem we shouldn't be asking our prospect BANT criterion. Yeah, it's really great to know whether they're qualified in terms of these 4, but is it appropriate for us to ask someone that qualification metric right off the bat? The answer, in my experience, and I think when it comes to most of the people that I know, is no. So what can we do about it? What process can we put in place? And what is the line of what is truly objectively qualified? So for this piece, I wanted to transition into a new process that I've deployed with this current team and with all of my teams in the past. And this is going to be a process that's based off my experience. So the only 2 things that I can base anything off of, whether that's process or whether that's messaging or whether that's qualification metrics or conversion ratios, is the experience that I've had and what I've done to alleviate problems like this. So the process that I've put in place, the first question that I ask myself is could an AE sell to this person? Not did the AE sell to this person? Or was the AE hypothetically able to sell to this person on objective, tangible criterion versus were they able to close the deal? So to do this, the 2 qualification criterion for really any meeting are usually based on one of 2 things. Number 1 is firmographic data. Was this a company that we could sell to? So for over here at Chorus, we sell to companies that have the right integration stack. We sell to companies that are within a couple of industry verticals. We sell to companies that are predominantly English speaking. We sell to companies that don't have heavy field sales teams, but that are inside sales teams and are using some kind of web conferencing system or some kind of dialer to do so. So that is the ideal, the ICP that we have internally. So was this a company is the first question that we need to ask when it comes to qualification. Was this a company that hypothetically we could have sold to or the account executive could have closed a deal with? Or was there a criterion that was outside of their control that prevents them from even closing this deal regardless of the rapport in the room? The second question that we need to answer in our qualification metric is a demographic one. Was this an acceptable title? This is very important to account executives. When I was an account executive and I was selling, I once had the experience that I started really low down the organization and I got the first 5 steps of the sales process done, but then I didn't get the 6th step. And the reason was they had to go up the chain and get that deal approved by someone completely different. I went to my boss and I asked them what happened, and he said, everyone has to learn this usually just one time. You should hunt top down as opposed to bottom up. If you hunt top down, then you get the original decision maker involved that you need to have involved at the beginning, and then you go down the funnel. So when it comes to a demographic criterion, as in title, we want to make sure that the person that we're talking to is the right person in the room. Is this a person that was involved in the decision-making process? Now, whether that was a champion or whether that was someone who pulled the final trigger is up to you and your company. Usually I do a ranking system within a KPI system to incentivize my reps financially to book meetings that are higher up the funnel. But the second question you need to be asking is this the right title or the right department of someone internally that we really like to sell to as a company? So you have firmographic and you have demographic criterion that you should be qualifying, not on the subjective criterion on was there a need, is there a timeline, or did they have a budget to do this, or were they the authority on this? So how you can do this is on an inbound qualifying line. I typically, and I go into this in one of my other videos, but basically on an inbound line, I have someone gate their email address and type in their email address. It comes to a longer form, and they should have to fill in firmographic criterion there. This is their title, this is their sales team size, and this is their integration stack. And I ask them, did we get that right? If they confirm, then that is a qualified meeting. On the outbound line, I have my reps look at firmographic and demographic data alone. So they see, is this the right title person? And is this a company in terms of tech stack, in terms of size, and in terms of inside sales teams and sales teams that are selling via web conferencing system before we reach out to someone. When we pass it over to the account executive, if it's the right title and it's the right company, guess what the account executive should do? So we over here at Chorus, we had them confirm that that was the person that we said it was. We have them confirm that the person showed up to the meeting, but then the rest of the selling is up to them. So in the beginning of sales development, when we made this bifurcation of we want sales development to do prospecting and we want the sales to be doing the closing, I really feel like the goal was we wanted to put qualified prospects in the chair. So this is a process of, these are 2 very, very tangible criterion of, is this the right company, and was this the right title on LinkedIn for us to sell to? So in review, here's a couple of the disadvantages of having your AE determined is you have, high volatility, you have a lot of variance between, the different appointments that your reps are setting and not. But another thing I didn't go into here is it can really frustrate and discourage your SDR reps, and it can make them spend the time bugging your account executive to qualify something or say that meeting was confirmed whenever you don't have to, as an organization, spend the time there. Number 2, I would avoid any kind of BANT process or asking your prospects the right questions. And number 3, I would alleviate all of those problems by having a process that you just pass the appointment over and have the AE confirm that firmographic and demographic data was correct. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope you're having a great rest of your day.